How do you feel? Have you had time to reflect? I stood face to face with my husband, the man who had thrown me out of my own home after blindly swallowing his son's lies. He looked at me with smug superiority, as if he held all the power. I laughed softly. Reflect? No, not at all, I said calmly, pulling a folder from my bag. Now please sign here. I handed him the divorce papers, along with the legal documents my lawyer had carefully prepared. He signed the first page with no resistance, but when his eyes landed on the attachments, his expression froze. His hand trembled. Beside him, his son Jim began to panic. The web of lies they had spun was unraveling before their eyes. My name is Mary. I'm 52 years old, an ordinary office worker. I had been married just a year when my husband Brian chose to believe his grown son over me. Jim, despite being an adult with a full-time job, refused to move out of the house. From the start, I hoped he would leave, but Jim clung to the past. This is my mother's house, he declared. She died 5 years ago, and I won't leave the home I shared with her. I understood grief. I had lost my first husband around the same time Jim lost his mother, but sympathy didn't make his hostility any easier to live with. One evening, after I had spent hours cooking, Jim sneered as he picked at his food. My mum was a better cook, but I guess I'll eat this. The disdain in his voice cut deep. I asked Brian what I should do. He just shrugged. Then don't cook for him, he doesn't have to eat it. So I stopped, but when Jim came home to an empty table, he exploded. Why isn't there food for me? You married my dad, so it's your job to cook for me too. No matter what I did, I was wrong. Jim's contempt grew, and Brian's indifference left me isolated in my own marriage. Before our wedding, Brian had promised me Jim would move out soon. But instead, I discovered the truth. Jim had squandered the inheritance from his late mother on luxuries and was drowning in debt. He could afford to live on his own. He just didn't want to. The tension worsened when my daughter Emma, from my first marriage, shared joyful news. "Mom, I'm engaged," she told me, her eyes sparkling. It was the first bright moment I'd had in years. "Congratulations," I said warmly. "Your father in heaven must be smiling." Emma hesitated before adding, "Do I really have to introduce him to Brian? He's nothing to me." I couldn't blame her. Brian had never shown her kindness. Still, I urged her to at least greet him briefly. When I told Brian about her engagement, he barely reacted. Jim, however, smirked. "Why don't you just divorce Dad and live with your daughter? You probably hate it here anyway." I was stunned. Brian said nothing. He just walked away. Later, when I finally met Emma's fiancé, I felt relief. He was Jim's age, yet everything Jim wasn't: mature, kind, dependable. He even reassured me gently, "If things don't work out with your husband, you can always live with us." His words filled me with hope, but when I returned home, Jim greeted me with venom. "The housekeeper is late, Dad and I are starving." The insult stung, but Brian ignored it as if nothing had happened. Compared to Emma's fiancé, both Brian and Jim looked utterly pathetic. And then Brian's mysterious weekend disappearances began. "I'm helping a friend whose mother is in the hospital," he claimed, but deep down I knew he was lying. Deep down I knew Brian was lying. One evening I confronted him. "This friend of yours, she's a woman, isn't she?" For a split second, panic flickered in his eyes before he rushed out a denial. Too quick, too defensive, my doubts only grew stronger. Jim, of course, noticed the tension. He smirked, feeding off it like a vulture. "Dad probably regrets marrying an old lady like you. Maybe he wishes he'd picked someone younger. You're going to get cheated on and kicked out, poor thing." The words cut deep, not because they were cruel, but because part of me feared they might be true. "Why don't you just give up on Dad and leave before things get messy?" he added smugly. That was the moment I realized I couldn't keep living like this. I began to wonder if Brian was grooming his mistress to take my place. Just as despair was creeping in, my daughter Emma called. "Mom, I need to talk to you. Can you come over?" Her voice was urgent. Worried, I went straight to her home, where her fiancé Jack was waiting too. "What's wrong? Don't tell me you're calling off the wedding," I blurted. They exchanged uneasy smiles. "No, the wedding is still on," Emma assured me. "This is about you." Confused, I sat down. Jack pulled out his phone and showed me a photo. "Is this your husband, Brian?" At first, I didn't recognize him. Then my eyes fixed on the familiar clothes, the profile I knew too well, and the young woman clinging to his arm, calling him by name. They were at a wedding venue, planning their own. I felt the blood drain from my face. Brian had no daughters besides Jim. That woman couldn't possibly be family. The truth hit me like a punch. He was preparing to marry someone else, while still married to me. She's way too young to be Jim's girlfriend, Emma said, frowning. I admitted what I had long suspected. Brian was cheating, but I never imagined he'd stoop so low as to plan a whole new life behind my back. Emma and Jack were outraged. I poured everything out, Brian's absences, his excuses, his evasive behavior. Your husband is despicable, Jack said firmly. We'll get evidence. He's not going to walk away from this scot-free. Mum, you need to divorce him, Emma urged. I nodded, but I knew I needed proof. Concrete, undeniable proof. Jack offered to find a private investigator. Don't worry about your future, he added kindly. You can live with us. Their support gave me strength. That night, when I returned home, Jim greeted me with his usual venom. You're late. Housekeepers shouldn't keep their masters waiting. Dad and I are starving. The insult burned, but I held my silence. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing me break. Soon enough, all of this would collapse on him. Once Brian remarried, Jim would have to rely on a new stepmother, and I doubted she would tolerate his abuse. Later that evening, I tested Brian. Will you be coming to Emma's wedding? It's at a very prestigious venue. I casually mentioned the same place from the photo. His face stiffened for a fraction of a second before he muttered, I've never heard of it. That reaction told me everything I needed to know, but instead of pressing further, he changed the subject. Jim hasn't asked you for money, has he? He's been struggling. I blinked. No, he never asks me for anything, except dinner. Brian sighed. He blew through his inheritance, now he's begging me for help. Can't you talk to him? Tell him to be more responsible? I was stunned. Jim doesn't listen to me. He's your son. You should be the one talking to him. But Brian pressed on, pleading, Don't be so cold. I'm not good at handling tough conversations. His weakness sickened me. The next day he asked again, Have you spoken to Jim yet? What did he say? And in that moment, I realized just how far gone he really was. Weak, deceitful, and shackled to a son who would destroy him. When I told Brian I hadn't spoken to Jim, his face twisted with anger. What are you doing? You need to talk to him right away. His constant nagging was unbearable. I decided I wouldn't waste another second trying to fix his broken family. My focus would be on gathering proof of his affair. Once I had it, I'd free myself from both Brian and Jim forever. Still, to quiet him, I reluctantly approached Jim. Your father is worried about your spending, I said carefully. He asked me to remind you to be more careful with money. Jim's eyes burned with hostility. Who do you think you are, housekeeper? It's my money, and I'll do whatever I want. None of your business. In that moment, I understood why Brian avoided the subject. Jim was impossible. Yet Brian's cowardice enraged me. He ignored his son's failings while parading around with his mistress. Jim leaned closer, sneering. I'll get you kicked out of this house. Just wait. The words stung, but I reminded myself, soon I would leave on my own terms. A few days later, Emma called. Mum, we have the proof. Meet us at a restaurant. My heart pounded. Had he really been unfaithful? Emma's voice was steady. Yes, he's with a much younger woman. They're even house hunting together. Jack slid an investigation report across the table, photos of Brian and his mistress holding hands, laughing, touring wedding venues. Evidence I couldn't deny. You need to divorce him immediately, Jack said firmly. She's dangerous. She spends recklessly and may even be seeing other men. She'll bleed him dry. I realized Brian wasn't just cheating. He was being used. Still, my path was clear. I had to act fast. When I returned home, Brian and Jim were waiting in the living room. Mary, sit down. We need to talk, Brian ordered. Jim smirked. We know about you. Dad saw you with another man. Look, proof. He shoved a blurry photo in my face, me at dinner with Emma and Jack. Caught red-handed. Pathetic. Dating a guy your daughter's age, Jim sneered. I stayed calm. That's Emma's fiancé. She was with us. But Brian wouldn't listen. Jim caught you. You've been cheating. Get out of this house. We'll deal with the divorce later. His arrogance almost made me laugh. Fine, I said coldly. I'll leave. We'll settle divorce and finances later. As I walked out, Jim shouted after me, "Make us dinner before you go. I'm hungry." Even in that moment, all he cared about was food. I ignored him and left, clutching the report like a lifeline. 3 weeks later, Brian contacted me. "Let's meet at the house, bring the divorce papers." This time I didn't come alone. Emma, Jack, and our lawyer walked in with me, Brian's face drained of color. "Why didn't you come alone?" "You never asked me to," I replied coolly. The house reeked of neglect after only 3 weeks without me. Brian sneered anyway. "Even if you bring an army, you'll still pay alimony." I laughed. "I've done nothing wrong. Sign these." I slid the divorce papers toward him. He scoffed. "Why should I pay alimony? You cheated." He waved the blurry photo again. Our lawyer calmly handed him the investigator's report. "Actually, we have proof of your affair." Brian's face turned ashen. Jim sat frozen. Finally, Brian muttered, "I can't pay alimony. I'm broke. I borrowed money for the wedding and honeymoon." Jim's mask cracked. "Wait. You're not really remarrying, are you? I don't want to lose half my inheritance." Brian shook his head. "It's gone. I already spent your mother's inheritance." Jim collapsed. "Dad, can't you lend me money? You have something left, right?" Brian whispered, "I'm broke." I looked straight at Jim. "I found your debt notices while cleaning your room. At your age, it's pathetic to let your mother clean up after you." Our lawyer pushed the papers back across the table. This time, Brian signed them. Jack added calmly, "By the way, your mistress is seeing other men. She's burning through your money." Brian's hands shook as he tried to call her. No answer. "Mary, I'm sorry. Don't leave us," Jim begged suddenly. "Dad's never home. I'm sick of eating junk food." I stood. "Ask your father's new wife. You'll have a young housekeeper soon enough." And I walked out for the last time. We went straight to City Hall and filed the divorce. I moved in with Emma and Jack. It was a little cramped, but we planned to buy a bigger home together. Weeks later, I heard Brian's mistress had run off with his money, leaving him in debt and disgrace. Jim even called me, begging, "Mum, Dad's gone. I have nowhere to live." "I'm not your mother," I replied coldly, "and I'm no longer your father's wife." When he kept pestering me, Jack threatened to involve the police. That shut him up. Life with Emma and Jack was peaceful, filled with warmth I hadn't felt in years. Soon, Emma shared the best news of all. She was pregnant. For the first time in so long, I felt nothing but joy. I was going to be a grandmother, and this time I was determined to spend every moment cherishing the family that truly mattered.